Hey, everybody, welcome to the Clean Comedy Podcast. Today, I have a great guest for you. Before we jump into the episode, I want to remind you guys that I started another podcast called the Funny Money Podcast. So it's all about teaching you comedy writing, how to make money as a comedy writer outside of the traditional Hollywood style or the traditional sense. So you can write, I've written everything from jokes and greeting cards to feature films and books, and most of it is a ghostwriter. Some has my name on it, stuff like that. But I made over six figures doing it. And I will basically want to offer that to you guys. And I think for $5 a month, you're going to get 4 episodes, a bunch of posts, all kinds of templates, ideas, information in other interviews. So I think it's worth it. Like a lot of people ask me about it. And so I was like $5 seems fair to me. It seems fair to me, but maybe you guys think it's not fair. I don't know. We'll find out. There's 2 episodes are out. There's more episodes coming every Thursday. So Clean Comedy Podcast Tuesday, Funny Money on Thursday. And then posts go up throughout the week as we go. So just wanted to get that out there. Now, this week I have a great guest for you guys. He is he works at the Comedy Store. He closes out there. He's a paid regular. He's also all over America as a comedian. He's a great guy, very funny, good friend of Darren Carter. That's how I met him. And then we got introduced to the Comedy Store, got to talking, have a lot of things in common. We're both big like comic book guys and stuff. He got me on to Midnight Suns, which now I played way too much of, and it might be an issue. But please welcome the very funny, very talented Mike Black. Welcome, sir.
Hi, good to see you, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you. Is that a Doctor Strange shirt that you're wearing?
Yeah, it is. I don't know if it can,
Yeah, that's awesome, dude.
it's in the frame there. I have a whole slapdash operation going on with my iPhone and a flashlight today, but
it works.
Trying to make it work because I spent too much time playing Midnight Suns last night to wake up and prep for this earlier. It's like, no, I just got Wolverine and Deadpool, so I'm like, I was like, well, I'm not gonna get enough sleep tonight.
That's awesome. I'm hoping that at you guys, sorry guys, I'm hoping at some point they're gonna add the Punisher in there. He's like my all-time favorite comic book character. I don't know if they ever will, but if they added Deadpool and Wolverine, it seems like they should.
Yeah, I hope they do. I think they've had a lot of trouble with that character lately, like making him seem legit to millennials and stuff. So I get it, but it's like I really like the Punisher. Yeah. So I would hope that he would get added in somewhere, at least get mentioned. That would, something.
Yeah.
Because they've had some, I'm not going to spoil anything, but they've had some cool cameos of characters that you can't play, but it's like, oh, they did a whole scene with that guy, so that's pretty cool.
That is, I cannot wait. It's going well. It's I'm not used to turn-based games, so it's really fun. But I'm used to more like first-person shooters or RPGs like Fallout or stuff like that. So that's kind of my bread and butter. Or WWE because I'm a big WWE nerd, but like WWE.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, the only other game that I just got a PS5, so it's new to me, but I'm getting stuff that like resonates with an old 80s sort of kid, like they released it a while ago, but I just got RoboCop, which is a first-person shooter.
Oh, awesome.
And it's fantastic. And it was one of those like sleeper hits. Like they were like, we'll give it a shot. And it did so well that now people are like, we want add-on content and we want more stuff. And they got Peter Weller to come back and voice RoboCop for it.
Wow.
It is really fun. I platinumed that game in like a week.
Wow.
Like, this game was just way too much fun. But yeah.
Well, when you're not playing video games, you are doing stand-up comedy. So tell us a little bit about your journey into stand-up comedy, how you kind of got there and stuff, because you're a paid regular at the Comedy Store. You are there. How often are you there? It seems like every night. I feel like you're there every night.
It seems like that on the outside, but to me, I'm like, I wish I was here more. You kind of feel that way about your home club, I think, But I'm usually there once or twice a week. Well, no, that's not true. 3 times.
Okay.
Like 1 to 3 times a week, depending on the week. And it's like, I'm not like a big household name guy. So if they have like a lot of those come in, I'm there less. But on a lot of the weeks, they're out busy doing stuff. And so I get to go and they let me close out the original room a lot of the time. It's closing out / opening for Don Barris. It's not really like I'm closing out like the booked show, but then a lot of times we'll have fallouts, which are like great young comics that are just starting out, and or they're the door guys that have worked there for a while, and they're getting stage time, but they're not getting like that late night rough OR toughest room in the world sort of stage time, which makes you grow as a comic so fast and so hard that I liken it to being like, if you've done that for a couple of years where you've done like late night spots in the OR, it's kind of like living on Krypton. And then anywhere else you go is like Earth. You're like, oh, I have superpowers here, but back there I'm just a regular guy. But here it's like, I've done shows where a biker gang tried to fight the cops in the background, and it was like, okay, well, I can't really hold everyone's focus while that's happening, but as soon as it's over, I can get them back, and that sort of thing. It's like you're just ready for more. Like I used to say it was like performing on a pirate ship, because that's very close to what it's like. It's like you're dealing with a lot of people on Sunset Boulevard who were tried to impress each other with how much they could drink somewhere else, and then they came there, and so they're all kind of, even the nice people are a little bit rowdy. They're kind of like, how sometimes if you're, and I'm very much this kind of a conversational sort of comedian, drunk people will think you're just talking to them and that they should reply, and so they'll be like, I do that, or I have one of those, or that sort of thing, and so it's like they're not really heckling, they just think that it's just for them. So I get a lot of that sort of stuff, but I really do think it makes you stronger. I think that club, more than, not to throw shade at the Improv or the Laugh Factory or anything, but they're very much more showcase oriented, sort of industry heavy clubs, where it's more about like, you go there, you kill with your very, very best network clean sort of set to try and get whatever your agenda is for the entertainment industry. Whereas the Comedy Store is where you work, is where you develop and get as strong as you can as a comic. And it's, if the Improv is the gym that Rocky was in Rocky 3, with champagne and like supermodels and stuff like that, a rock band playing. The Comedy Store is the gym Mr. T was in, where it was just like him, a homeless guy in a punching bag, and just working,
Yeah, no, I can see that. Especially because, the 3 rooms are for different things. Like the original room is that just that you work. Like that's where you're working on stuff, and it's not there to be flashy, whatever. You go up to the belly room, that's grittier. That's where the roast battle is, and like those other kind of smaller shows. And then
it's also more intimate. I really like, I haven't done the belly room in a long time, but I really love the intimacy there of that space, because nothing gets lost. Any little thing, for good or bad, anything that you're doing, the audience is catching,
Well, and that whole wall is mirrors on the one side too there. So like, it throws you off a little bit if you're up there on that stage, because you can see everything and you're not used to that.
Well, and not only that, you've got the mirrors on one side, and you've got like kind of a side panel on the other side, and they're reflected in the mirrors. So it really seems like arena style, like you're really having to be present and in the moment. And I find that a lot of times your hand material has to fight a little bit harder in a room like that. It's like crowd work goes really well, and like just true stories or just stuff from your life tends to go very well, because it's so authentic and the space is so intimate that everyone can feel that authenticity. So if you're doing like your act, it better ring authentic and true, or it's just not going to fly in a room like that. I think the OR is kind of a good mix of both, where it's like you can do material, but it still has to come off pretty authentic in that room. And it kind of lends itself to going, just be funny. Don't be canned funny. Be with us in this moment. Everyone here is connected with you in this particular kind of room. It's like no matter how much they black out the audience, you can still see the whole audience in both of those rooms. And so there's no guessing on like, am I bombing or am I doing well or anything like that. Immediately what people are feeling and what each person in the room is feeling. Like if there's a guy who is just not into you for whatever reason, you see that guy, he sticks out like a sore thumb in either of those rooms. Like the main room is much more of a showcase room, but it's a very different style. It's almost theater in the round in there, and like I love it, but it's also a very complex room to play, like especially if it's not like a full crowd, if it's like a late night, kind of spread out islands of people. That's a really, really tough room, but it's I know an interesting thing about the main room and the original room that we heard at the service for Mitzi Shore after she passed. They had a bunch of different speakers come up and talk, and one of them was Yakov Smirnoff, who's now he's kind of made a huge industry out of his name in Branson, Missouri. Well, he got his start there, and he was like a young Russian immigrant, and him and his dad were living there, really just trying to make money so that he could pursue stand-up comedy. Well, Mitzi figured that out and goes, she was just starting the club. She was just opening it up. She goes, well, we're going to need tables and chairs in both of those rooms. So let me hire you and your dad to make them. And because they had a carpentry in their history. And so he pointed around the room and he was like, all of the chairs and tables that you guys are sitting in were built by me and my father.
Wow.
He was like, yeah, it's the same ones for sure. I know because I built them, that these are the exact same ones. And Byron Allen told an amazing story about how he was like, at the time, he was like a young, eager door guy sort of comic. And one day Mitzi calls him up and is like, what are you doing tomorrow? And he's like, nothing, Mitzi. What do you need? Come by and we're going to clean out the attic. And he goes, okay. And so they go to the Comedy Store and start cleaning out the attic. And he goes, are you going to do like storage space here or like maybe a bar or something like that? And she goes, no, I just realized we have enough female comics now to do an all-female show, and I don't think anyone's ever done that before. So this place was called the Belly Room back when it was Ciro's, so we're going to call it that again and just have all-female lineups. He was like, she cleaned out an attic and started a revolution because no other clubs had done that. And they finally felt like, oh, we have enough talent to book an all-female show. And so that's what they started doing there, and it became a huge hit. And now the Belly Room's still there to this day, doing a lot of very experimental sort of shows and comedy, aside from the regular stand-up that they do. Like Roast Battle got its start there. The Longest Show at the Comedy Store, the Ding Dong Show, got started there. Yeah, it's pretty amazing the history of that place. Even before it was the Comedy Store, when it was Ciro's, and it was where Desi Arnaz, they would shoot I Love Lucy during the day, and then he would go and do a Congo show there at night. And the Rat Pack played there, all sorts of like crazy acts, like whoever was famous at that time was playing there at some point or another,
That's amazing. Yeah, I do remember that. I remember reading, I think it was reading and also watching I'm Dying Up Here, and like just all about the history of that stuff. Now, how did you start at the Comedy Store? Did you start somewhere else and then you moved out to LA? Like, what's your kind of comedy journey to get there?
when I was a little kid, like little, I was like maybe 5, I was watching Mork and Mindy and just loving it, starring Robin Williams, the great Robin Williams. And brother, my brothers are from my mom's first marriage, so they're quite a bit older than me. And one of my brothers was with me watching it, and I was kind of like imitating Mork, and I was actually like so deeply into it that my parents got me the rainbow suspenders.
No way.
Like that. Like there was a lot of merchandising for that show that I was very insistent. I was like, Mom, please let me get the rainbow suspenders. She was like, I'm so glad you're not in school yet, because those kids would bully the hell out of you, you know. And but I was like super into it. And my brother goes, what do you want to do when you grow up, Mike? And I was like, I want to do that. I just pointed at the TV and I was like, I want to do that. And he was like, well, he's not really an alien. You can't really do that. I was like, no, but he's pretending to be one. And he was like, yeah. And he was like, well, that's what I want. I want to be paid to pretend, basically, you know. Jesus. And he was like, when he heard that, credit to my brother, he started bringing home comedy albums. Like that was a big thing in the 70s and 80s. Yeah. Was if you liked a comic, instead of like YouTube or Instagram or TikTok, you had to go and buy an album at a record store of theirs. And he brought home stacks of them after that. And he didn't care if it was like Eddie Murphy or whoever, like he didn't care if they cussed or whatever. He would just bring in whoever he could and just play them for me. And then we would stay up and watch Saturday Night Live, or we would watch movies. Then he got a job at a movie theater that had like 16 screens. So he was like, after school, if you want, just come see a movie for free. And I would just go to the movies as much as I could. So I had this really, really fortunate thing of having an older brother that was supportive. And not that my parents were not, they were very, very supportive. Like I started wanting to do theater, and my mom would drive me like way off into the boonies to rehearse for a play for 2 months. Wow. And, then come, and she would bring her friends to come see it and stuff like that. So, but it was always in the back of my head that what I really wanted to do was stand up. And I did plays in high school, and I studied theater in college. But in the back of my head, I was like, I want to do stand-up, but I don't want to do it here. I lived in Colorado. Okay. And I was worried that if I did stand up in Colorado, I would stay there. Oh. I would find like a cushy enough sort of weekend gig that it would be like, well, this is enough. I can work at Blockbuster during the week and do this on the weekend, and just like, I don't need to go really try, And so I was afraid of that in a good way. And so I was like, well, it's either New York or LA, maybe Chicago, It was like a distant third, to be honest. Yeah. But I was like, all the horror stories I'd heard from friends moving to New York, where it was like, it's $3,000 to live in a closet every month, and you're just grinding to stay alive, and you have very little free time to actually pursue comedy. And what I was hearing about LA was far different. I don't think the living situation was much, much better, but it was better. And I was like, and also it seemed at the time like there were a lot more opportunities. There was, TV, film, theater, all sorts of other things. If I couldn't make a go of comedy, I could make a go of one of those, And so I got out here, was here about a year before my friend Brian kind of pushed a booker to book me on a show. And he was like, he's never done stand-up before, but let him do like 7 minutes at your show.
7 minutes?
Wow. And they were like, yeah, because we'd hung out and stuff, and we'd all like eaten together, and I would make them laugh and stuff. And they were like, okay, yeah, well, your first time will be in like a month, and you'll do 7 minutes. And I was terrified. And so I wrote like 20, and I didn't know when I was going to get the light, because I didn't know what 7 minutes felt like, you know? And so I just motored through material at like the fastest I've ever done it. So I crammed about 20 minutes into 7 minutes. I was literally almost out of material by the time I got the light. And so I was like, I'm going way too fast and I might have a heart attack. And that'll be like the saddest
closer
stand-up legend ever. There was that one guy who I guess he did a bunch of crystal meth and then did 7 minutes and died, but they wouldn't know your name or anything and so I didn't want to be that guy, but I was like, I can't help it. This is how fast I need to get the stuff out. And so I did that. And then shortly after that, I was like doing all the stuff you do when you start out and don't know any better. I was going to bringer shows and I was going to like, wearing out my friends going, please come to my show, do flyering and all that stuff, And then finally, I started going to the Comedy Store and doing the open mic there. And Bobby Lee noticed me and Ari Shaffir noticed me, who are two of the best people you could have on your side in that time. And then they sent me up to see Duncan Trussell, who was the talent coordinator at the time. And we both thought I think we were both told different things. I was told to go and talk to him about a showcase. He thought I was there trying to get a job at the Comedy Store as a door guy or something like that. And so we both have this awkward, like, well, when can you start? And I was like, oh, as soon as you want, I'll start right away, And he's like, great. How much do you want us to pay you? I was like, I don't know, whatever you think's fair. I haven't done comedy very long. I'm thrilled that the meeting's going this well. And I'm like, they're already hiring me. This is great. And so Duncan finally goes, wait, do you not want to be a door guy? I was like, I'm making money on commercials. I don't want to take that job from another comic that needs it. And he was like, oh, well then what are you doing here? And I was like, well, they said to talk to you about a showcase. And he was like, oh yeah, let's get you a showcase. So he was like, we'll showcase you for Mitzi. And I was like, okay, great. And so I do my first one, which was.
What year is this, by the way? What year is this happening?
This would be about 2000.
Okay.
Maybe 2001.
So kind of what Joe Rogan refers to as the dark era of the Comedy Store.
Right. Like Mitzi's like heading towards the end. I think she lasted about 10 more years, but still it was like.
Yeah, she was a little sick and like not there as much and not as there day to day.
Yeah, and so she wasn't doing day to day, and like showcases were fewer and farther between because of that. But the first one I did with her, like no matter how you slice, I don't care if you're the coolest guy in the world, you're performing for someone who passed Jerry Seinfeld. She passed, Richard Pryor. Jay Leno and David Letterman, like legends. Anyone in the business has come through that place and felt that, and so I did the first showcase was 3 minutes. That's what they give you. And I have no idea what I said. Like it was that like weird. I went into like a fugue sort of state and then like, they're like, okay, so don't bother her on your 3-minute showcase. She's not gonna like wave you over to talk or anything like that.
Just the couch.
Yeah, just do your showcase and get the hell out. So I was like, okay, and so I like barely made eye contact with her, and she kind of went like that, and that was as much as I got. And so then the next day,
I would have been stoked with that. Honestly, we just like because I've heard that there was a time where like comedians would talk to her while someone was doing stuff. And then they would not get past because they were like, kind of blocking that.
Right. So she didn't like distraction at all.
Yeah. So that's amazing.
And so I was like, my heart was racing for like the next hour after that. And, and I went and like celebrated just doing it. Just like, I was like, I don't care how it turns out. Just celebrate that you got that far in the process. And so they called me the next day and they were like, okay, you're a non-paid regular. That was back when that was a thing that no longer exists. But they were like, okay, you're a non-paid regular. So you can perform here on these dates and these dates. And then in 6 months, you'll showcase again for a paid regular, you know. And so in that time, I worked my ass off as much as I could to get ready. And they were like, you know, everyone was telling me at that time, they were like, the paid regular showcase is longer because they need to know that you can do a full set here. So it's going to be 15 minutes. And I was like, okay, so that's double what I've got right now as far as my head math is going, you know. And I'm like, okay, so I'm working my ass off on that. And I was so lucky that Bobby Lee and Ari Shafir were the guys who vouched for me, because they both knew that when you do that big showcase, you need someone running interference with Mitzi.
Right.
So Ari sat right next to her to keep other open micers and tourists and what have you from bothering her, just so that she could focus on what I was doing. So the day of that showcase, my car breaks down.
Oh, no.
And I was like, come on, like this can't really be happening. But I was like, it broke down. There was no way to fix it in time to get. So I'm like, okay, taking the bus to the Comedy Store. So like, luckily it happened early. I left early enough in the day to know that this was happening. I spent an hour and a half on the bus, wow, going from Koreatown to Hollywood. And I asked the bus driver when we got close, I was like, can you drop me at the Comedy Store? And he goes, man, you don't want that. I was like, what do you mean? He goes, you don't want all the other comics. He just kind of knew that I was,
yeah.
He was like, you don't want all the other comics. Can you get off the bus? Let me drop you off at the Hyatt or something. And I was like, okay, thank you for that.
That's genius.
I was like, thank God for that, dude. You know, because they would have torn me apart if they saw me getting off the bus on the day of my showcase. So, and I'm like dressed in what I think grown-ups wear. I'm like, I've got like a blazer and I'm surprised I didn't wear an admiral cap or something, you know, like just dressed like an idiot, really.
Have a cane. You're like, yeah. Top of the morning, everybody. Like
a monocle and stuff, you know, like, why is he dressed like Mr. Peanut? That makes no sense. Is this a new character he's doing? And so like, I get there and I get in and my buddy Dave Taylor is kind of running the room. And so he goes, oh, we had a lot of celebrity pop-ins call in. So we're having to cut time on a lot of stuff. So instead of 15, you're going to do 10. And I was like, okay, that's not bad. I can just do the best of that. That's okay. So I'm working on my 10 in the back and everything. And then comes up to me a little later and he goes, it's actually 7. Sorry. And then he runs off, you know. So now I'm in the hole. Someone else is on stage. And I don't remember who it was, but they were not doing well. And the audience was not enjoying what they were doing. So I'm like, oh, great. And Paulie comes into the room, sees how bad it's all going. And he looks at me, he knows me well enough at that point. And he goes, are you up next? And I was like, yeah. And he looks at the room, like just how dead it is. And he goes, oh, I'm out of here. And it was kind of like, what he was trying to say was like, I don't want to watch you bomb in front of this horrible room.
Yeah.
So I'm going to do you the courtesy of taking off, yeah, so you don't have that extra pressure. But what it looked like in front of his mom was like, oh, you're next? I'm out, you know. But he realized that and he got like right to the door and he was like, oh, I just kind of screwed him over in front of mom. So he turns back around and he goes, buddy, you're one of the funniest guys here. And he gives me a big hug and he goes, you're going to do great tonight, like right in front of her. And then he takes off. And I was like, okay, that took a lot of the pressure off of that. At least it's not going to be that, you know. And so now I'm like, okay, everything's going to be okay. And then Dave Taylor comes over and goes, it's 3 minutes. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I go up. And again, I have no idea what I said or who I said it to. I might have admitted to a murder. There's no telling, like, I have no idea what actually happened. So I get off stage. And then this time they were like, if she does anything, go over to her, you know, like if she looks at you or anything, just. So I'm leaving the stage, and I think it went well, but I don't know for sure. And I kind of do like how dogs look when they've done something wrong, like, and she goes, like, which is not encouraging, really.
Yeah.
Like the fact that she was like grunting, like, and so I come over to her and she goes, "How did you come to us?" And I was like, on the bus." She goes, "No, idiot. Who who recommended you?" And I was like, "Oh, Arch is here." And she goes, "I guess you're a regular now. Go away." And I was like, "Okay, thank you, thank you." And so I left, and Ari came out and he was like, "You pretty much got it, but wait for the phone call tomorrow. So just, we'll see." And I've been there ever since, and they've been really, really good to me. Like, that's how I got to start working. The first guy that took me on the road with him was Andrew Dice Clay.
Oh, wow.
And he was like just great. He saw me in some commercials, and then he saw my act. And Andrew he doesn't varnish his opinion at all. If he thinks you're funny, you're funny. If he doesn't think you're funny, he lets you know that too. He used to go in the back of the OR, and he would talk with like Eleanor Kerrigan or someone like that. And if someone was just terrible, he would say just loud enough to where he knew they could hear it. He would go, "This guy's a zero." And they're like halfway through their act, and they're like, "Oh God."
Why did you shoot me on stage, Clay? What's going on?
Yeah,
Come on, Dice Man. What's wrong with you?
Then have that,
Yeah.
This guy's a zero. It's one of the most brutal cut downs I've ever heard, And but if he liked you, he has the best laugh in the world if you get him going. And he laughs so hard that he starts like hitting things like himself and stuff like that. It's like, this guy's great, And so I got to work with him. I eventually got to work with a lot of people that I grew up watching. And this is one of the best things about this job, I think, is that you get to work with a lot of people. There's no old timers day. You can do this literally until you die, And I got to work with the great, legendary John Panette, who a lot of people know him as he was the guy they didn't help on the last episode of Seinfeld that got them all put in prison. And he's a great, fantastic stand-up in his own right out of Boston. At the time I was working with him, I would estimate that he had about in the neighborhood of 5 hours of material, and about 3.5 of that was clean.
Wow.
It was like undeniably clean. You know what I mean? Like where you could put him at a picnic and it would be fine.
Wow.
And he was one of those guys too that was just so naturally funny. He could read a phone book and it would be hysterical the way he would do it. And the first time I met him was at the Improv in Tempe. But he was like, "Oh, you're a store guy?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he was like, "Here's $100 for coming out and doing this for me." He's like, "That's not your pay, but that's just for me." And I was like, "Oh, thank you." And he was like, "Do you want some avocado? I hear it's the good fat, like me." Sure. And he was like such a pro and such a gentleman to work with that on the closing night of his show, he threw a pizza party for the entire staff and gave them all signed DVDs of his last special, like autograph. He was like, "For anyone that wants it, I'll be here signing them." And so everybody got one, and they all thought he was great. He tipped everyone excessively all weekend. And so it was like our last night working together, and I was like, "You might be one of the nicest headliners that I've ever worked with." At that point, I'd worked with quite a few. And I was like, you really take care of the staff and everything. And he was like, "Oh, I learned that from Mr. S." And I was like, "Okay." And I didn't want to, I was like afraid to ask him about like I felt like I was supposed to already know who that was. So I didn't ask him about it that night. But he liked me enough that we worked together a couple more times, and he would bring up Mr. S every now and again. And I was like, "John, I gotta know who's Mr. S." And he was like, "Oh, I thought you knew I used to open for Frank Sinatra.
Oh, wow.
I'm sorry, what happened? Did I blacked out for a second there. He was like,
Wow.
yeah, he was like, that's how he was. He would just make sure and take care of everybody on the staff all the time. And he was like, he even died like a gentleman. And I was like, what do you mean by that? He was like, he knew he was on the way out. And I'd been working with him as his warm up at Caesar's Palace. And he was like, this next week is probably going to be my last week of shows. Just according to the doctor, it's I'm almost out. So this next week's going to be my last week. And as much as I love you, it's got to be Rickles. And he was like, oh, of course. You know, Don Rickles, known him forever. He was like, of course. He was like, so what we're going to do tonight's your last night, but you're going to bring up Don and kind of pass the torch so he knows there's no hard feelings. He was like, I want you to do 10 minutes, whatever you want to do, and bring him up. And he's like, okay, terrific. So he does 10 minutes, but he's so emotional and it's such a big deal to him that Sinatra has let him do all of this, that he does the best 10 minutes he can. And he destroys, just absolutely destroys. And the audience gives him a standing ovation at the end of the 10 minutes. Wow. He goes, and ladies and gentlemen, tears in his eyes. He's like, ladies and gentlemen, Don Rickles, and everyone just goes ballistic. They just go nuts now. Don Rickles comes over. Don Rickles is kind of crying a little bit, gives him a hug, and he goes, you'll get him next time.
Oh, geez. What a Rickles move, dude. That's so wild.
What a great thing, you know. And how he got the gig with Sinatra is crazy. This is something every comic should just like be thankful for the people you get to work with.
Yeah.
Because they have a lot on their plates. Especially if you're opening for someone or, you know, hosting or anything like that. So if they're taking care of you at all, you're doing pretty good. You know, he worked with opening for Kenny Rogers in Vegas across the street from Caesar's over at Bally's, I think.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
And so he was working there, and Kenny Rogers was a lot of fun. He was he'd been in movies and stuff like that. He was a fun guy to hang out with, and he would throw frisbees into the audience, like that had Kenny Rogers Roasters like logos on them and stuff. He was like, I'm going to throw these out, you know, as many, I got a dozen here. So if you get one, you get one. And at one point he's about halfway through and he's got one and he goes, people in the balcony. And they all, what? And he goes, I'm going to throw this up there. If it falls short, let it go. Like, you know, because people had just died to try and get it. You know? So he was really fun. But one night, John was doing his act, and being a Boston guy, an F word slipped out somewhere in the middle. Well, one of the pit bosses was in the room while that happened, and they were like, we can't have cussing, it's a family show, and told Kenny Rogers, he was like, well, we're sorry, our hands are tied for legal reasons, you got to fire that kid, you know. And he was like, I have to fire him? He's like, we can't have it. It's, you know, it's family show. We can't, if any of these customers complain, we're in real trouble. And so he's like, oh, okay. So he goes and tells John, he goes, John, you accidentally let an F word slip out. He goes, oh yeah, I'm real sorry about that. And he goes, yeah, they're making me fire you for cussing. And John goes, are you shitting me? And so Kenny Rogers laughed and he was like, look, you're one of the most talented comics I've ever worked with. I think you're amazing. Do not worry. You're going to land on your feet. Stay in the hotel for the rest of the week on me. Just, you know, get whatever you want. And I'm positive you're going to be fine. He gets back to his hotel room and there's a little blinking message on the phone. And he goes, he plays it. This is Dick Pizzicotta over at Caesar's Palace. I'm friends with Kenny Rogers. He informed me that you might be available now to open for Mr. Sinatra. Please call me back at your earliest convenience. So he fired him and got him promoted to like the best gig in Vegas at the time, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I had Tom Dreesen on here, and he was saying how wonderful it was to work for Sinatra all that time. So, you know.
Oh yeah, Yeah, Tom Greason got to do a ton of stuff with him.
Yeah.
And I have a weird
15 years or something like that, 15 or 17 years, something like that. It was like a long
time.
time.
Yeah, he would work with him a lot. And Sinatra had to like rotate out a lot of guys like Rickles and like occasionally like someone like Newhart if it was a very clean sort of show or stuff like that. But he had a lot of guys that he worked with, and he just loved comedy and he loved to laugh. And there's, that classic story of Rickles trying to impress his date. This one.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. No, tell it, because a lot of people don't know the story.
Where it's like he's on a date with a girl and he's really trying to impress her, and he knows Frank Sinatra and he sees Frank in the club and he sneaks off and he goes, Frank, I'm with this girl. It would really help me out a lot if you would just come by the table and say hello. And he's like, anything for you, of course, And so he goes and sits back down. Frank Sinatra, he looks the part. He's all, dressed right and everything. The lady's already like, her posture is just like, Frank Sinatra's in the building. Like, she's already thrilled that she's at a place that he's present in. He comes over, shakes down Rickles' hand, and he goes, Don, I just wanted to say to me, Frank, not now. I'm with people. Can't you see? I don't have time to tell you about your career. It's going to be fine. Just leave me alone. And so he just started dying. He was like, and that was really, like, they were already friends, but it was like after that they really gelled and got like really, really good friends,
Yeah. I love that. I always love that story, because you think like, oh, Frank's going to solve. No, Rickles is gonna mess with him right in front of his date. Like, you're like,
right.
But as a comedian, that happens to us, right? We go,
yeah,
we have comedian friends. We're out with people, or they notice us or whatever, and they give you a hard time, and you're like, oh, dude.
Yeah. Yeah, it's never easy. It's never just nice. I've been like, I was pumping gas one day and I thought I was getting robbed because I feel this big arm over me getting me in the sleeper hold. And I'm like, what the and I'm like trying to grab the arm. And then the guy starts laughing and I'm like, oh, I know that laugh. Hi, Dice. And he's like, hey, you just look so innocent. He's like, I had to come strangle you to death. And I was like, okay.
Do you remember the first comedy album you heard? Do you remember what it was?
Ooh, God. I don't. There was one that. The one that's sticking out in my head right now is one that Eddie Murphy did.
Is it comedian?
Where he sang, huh?
Is it comedian? The one comedian, or the singing one?
It wasn't the singing one.
Okay,
but there was a song on it.
Oh yeah.
It was that one. That's probably the first one. And he brought home, Billy Crystal had a great album where it was just him doing a bunch of sketches and characters from Saturday Night Live. Every Robin Williams album that was published, he brought home. And awesome. Like, I think my favorite one was Live at the Met. That one was really, really terrific. And Richard Pryor, Richard Pryor was, I think, the first one where it was like, I heard the album and then watched the special, and I was like, oh, this is so much better. Like,
do you remember which one it was?
I think it was Live on the Sunset Strip.
Okay, yeah.
And
we just talked about that the other day. We were all at it was Darren Carter and Kevin Alderman and Alan Cunningham and Dean Laird and me. We were all hanging out and we were talking about like Richard Pryor albums, and that one came up a lot,
Yeah, and it was like I heard it, but then seeing it was a whole other beast, And he was just seeing what he could do with his body and just how expressive he was and everything like that, and just maybe the best storyteller that ever lived. I don't know, he was so good. And we listened to one Carlin album, but we watched a lot. Like, we got HBO and watched like all his specials. And he's one of those that you definitely, it's better to see him than to hear him, Yeah. And I remember Carlin was the one that my dad came in and was like, what are you guys listening to? And he watched it with us, and he was just cracking up and just seeing how much he loved what he was doing. And then he started like realizing how that it was like, maybe this kid's not kidding. Maybe this is really what he wants to do. And my dad started adding to like taking me to see
Wow.
comedy movies and stuff like that. And, so it, it was a really cool experience and a weird bit of serendipity there. My dad is famous in our family for having lost concert tickets to see Elvis Presley, and my mom was like in love with Elvis, like no other performer, like a lot of women were at that
Yeah.
time. But but she loved him, and she nearly murdered my dad. But luckily, their mutual friend had backup tickets, and it's like
Saved
that's
his
just
life.
unheard of that happens. And so they got to go and they got to sit like pretty close and everything. But the show that they saw, Elvis's opener for that show was Sammy Shore.
Oh, wow.
And later on in life, when I was doing the Comedy Store, there was a reality show for a while called Minding the Store. And they had us, it was kind of about the Comedy Store at that time. And I got to do that show and open for his son. So that was kind of an interesting, like, weird bit of serendipity that happened where my mom got to watch his dad perform, and then I got to perform for his son, so that was kind of cool.
That's amazing. Now, you came out here, you went to the Comedy Store. That's your home club. It's a long process, right? That's a thing that like people have tried to do forever. Like I remember when I first started comedy, I was going every week, every Monday to go sign up on the store, on the outside. Now it's
Yeah.
an email system. But if you had to go do that again, if you had to go to that process again, it's like 1,000 times harder, right? Do you think it's 1,000 times harder? Do you think it's the same? Like what is the process
Harder
like
in some
now?
ways, easier in others, where
Okay.
like now people can kind of like set up chat groups and stuff like that and go like, oh, I'm going to be there on this day, and what do you think I should do? Should I do this and this? And there are a lot of people that show up to the club because they get a bunch of TikToks and stuff, and they already have 60,000 followers, and that gives you a kind of edge, I'm sure, in the way it's done now. It's harder in that there's a lot more people wanting to do it, I think. And I don't think that's going to change. I think that's going to get worse, actually.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot more people to weed through. And I don't envy bookers now, because a lot of people are sending them stuff that is just terrible, but they have a lot of followers, or they have, something else, some other kind of clout going on. And it's like, from a business standpoint, you got to at least try
Yeah.
a show with someone like that, because there's some really, really great comics out there that don't have any of that stuff, and so it's kind of a mix of like, uh, part of you has to keep the business open, and the other half wants to do a show where people keep coming back,
Yeah.
and that's not saying that everyone who's an influencer is going to put on a terrible show, but it happens. I think it happens a lot more often than with a comic who can send you a tape and you can just kind of see, oh, that guy's funny.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What would you, if someone was trying to get into it now, like if you had a piece of advice, or you had to go back or you got to, with all the knowledge you have now, you were starting over today and were able to go and give advice to your younger self starting out there at the store, what would be like your advice for
that? Don't go bald. Keep don't nobly go bald. Use Rogaine, use Staples, whatever it takes. Keep your hair, because it's very important. I didn't realize how important it was. It's super, super important. Look at any sitcom. Everyone's got hair, but so that would be my first piece of advice, is do that. Secondly, even like I hear health nuts say about going to the gym, it doesn't matter if you feel like it, just do it. That's how I feel about writing. Write every day. I would make you a promise, whatever position you're in as a comic right now, if you're watching this, if you treated comedy like a 40-hour-a-week job for a year, you will be in a substantially better place at the end of that year than you would have been otherwise. And what I mean by that is if you put 8 hours every day into at least half of that into writing and the rest into trying to get booked or do stand up, or even if you devoted the whole day to writing, you are going to be so much more prepared for all the opportunities that are coming. And opportunities will come even to the crappiest comic that there is. There will be someone who will go like, so-and-so canceled. Can you do 10 minutes? You have an impeccable 10 minutes if you've been writing every day for a year. You know what I mean? And almost like just invest that year in that. And then, you can even have the goal of like, if I do this at the end of the year, I don't ever have to write jokes again or something like that. Now, however you want to do it to motivate you to do it, but do it. And because at the end of that time, you're going to have so much stuff, and you'll also be a much better writer, not just a better performer, but a better writer. And that's a skill that you can bring to the stage. You just know how to be funny faster. And that doesn't seem like it's the goal, but it's the goal. Yeah. If you can be funny faster, it's the best thing you can be, because 20 minutes with you will seem like an hour, but in a good way. People will be like, how the hell did he pack that much into that short amount of time?
Yeah. What is your writing?
That would be.
What is your writing process right now? What do you kind of, or do you write, do you set, an hour a day, 2 hours a day? Like, what's your kind of writing process? That you brought that up.
I would say during the pandemic, it was a lot better. It was a lot of like writing. Now it's like really when I find the time, what I'll try and do is if I'm out doing errands and stuff like that, if I see a Starbucks, I'll just pop in there and try and write for an hour, and it's like, it may not be the best stuff. I may be exhausted, but even if I just get a few premises that I can work with the next day, or if I'm doing a show that night, it's better than nothing. It's always better to write stuff than not.
Yep.
A lot of times you'll see funny stuff throughout the day and go, oh, I'm going to write a great bit about that. And then you completely forget about it.
That's what I was going to say. Do you ever like record stuff into your phone? Like just say something to remind yourself, like this thing happened. And I want to talk, like, do you ever do that thing?
I do that a lot. And then the note never makes sense to me later. Whipped cream gunfire. I don't know. I guess that I don't know what that means.
I
seem to say the wrong thing to trigger the memory. It just comes out. If I die, knock for Micah or whatever. But if I die, there's gonna be a lot of notebooks that just seem like, oh, he was definitely a madman. This guy was just insane, because there's just all these scrawlings in chicken scratch of just lunatic stuff that makes no sense.
Found dill pickle firework. What is that about? What is that?
Yeah, I don't. You're like, Sharon's to blame. Who is Sharon?
What's he getting blamed for?
Yeah. He was obviously planning to kill Sharon, whoever she is.
It's right after this is whipped cream gunfire.
Yeah. Setting up some sort of elaborate trap for Sharon.
Do you find yourself handwriting then instead of typing? Is that what you do? Is your process of handwriting stuff?
I use the notes app in my phone, and I'll just do it in my phone. I used to carry like a Moleskine notebook with me everywhere, and I have about 30 of those just filled up with stuff. Half of it is good comedy, and the other half makes no sense at all. But that's just how it is. But it's always better to write, and it's always better to have the ability, have a pen and pad with you, or your phone, or whatever it takes. Have something, because too, sometimes you'll look through those old notebooks and see something, and it does make sense again, and you're like, oh right, I totally forgot about this funny premise or this idea or what have you.
That's exactly what I do. I will in my little notes app, I'll write down just whatever thing is in my mind and start writing. And if I'm driving, I have an app called Otter.ai. It records and it also transcribes. So we'll just write all the stuff out.
Oh, that's great. That's
So I have to
smart.
go, but I have to go back and like reread it, edit it, whatever. But I can do the stream of consciousness while I'm driving and not
Yeah.
forget something. Because sometimes you're driving, you see something or you're listening something and you think about it, and then you start to like, oh, I want to, and you're like, what do I do? So when I found that app, I just like hit start on there and I just start blah blah, like it just comes out. And I have to go back and listen to it. And sometimes this, like you record your sets, you listen to it, you go, yeah, that's what I sound.
Yeah.
That's what I sound like. Goodness gracious, like I'm an idiot, It's just like
mine. If I did that, it would just be a string of obscenities of me on the 405, just different creative names that I have for people that.
That's a bit though. That's a whole bit of like what is your deal of dealing with road rage? Some people are like passive aggressive. Some people are aggressive aggressive. Me, I just come up with dumb names for everybody. That guy, you're this guy, and you're that. That's a great. It's a great premise right there because
it's so much better than smashing your car into someone else. It's a much better release. Because that's my like deep down, I'm a very violent person. But luckily, I never learned how to fight really well. So I know that it's like, you're not going to win that way. So win with jokes instead. Yeah.
Winning with humor. That's what you have to. I mean, that's the way. Like you were right. If you were going to get in a fight as a kid, if you could make somebody laugh, usually that diffuses the situation, or you're in a tense situation. I was in the military. Yeah. I would say jokes if we were in very tense situations, like we're in Iraq, things are happening, everyone's stressed out. You just say something random and crazy and everyone starts laughing, and then it's like, okay, we brought it down a couple of notches, now let's get that going. And that to me is the biggest part of comedy, is you can go from having the worst day you've ever had in your life to laughing at something and being like,
absolutely
okay, that was good, like I would.
You know what, that made me think of a thing that really I think is the best advice that I can give at any comic, which is it's kind of a calling. Like being a comedian, like there's something in you that's drawing you to it. And if you're worth your salt at all, think of it as a 24-hour job. And what I mean by that is when you're dealing with someone at 7-Eleven and they're being like grumpy with you or crappy to you, or try and make that guy laugh. If you can get that guy to laugh in that situation, you're doing pretty good. Like do it everywhere. You're the whole, if you were to boil comedy down as a job, it's making someone's life a little bit better, like that's the whole point of it. So if you can try and see everyone that you encounter as an opportunity to do that, that will help you out tremendously, just across the board. Like it'll make people like you a lot more for sure, but like, if you've got someone, doing yard work for you or something like that, or anything, if you can find some way to just make everybody laugh, whether you're getting paid for it or not, it's going to really help you out in the long run, I think.
Yeah, that's 100% true. That's the thing. I mean, that's how I got my wife, right? I'm not a 10. She's hot. And so she's like, "Oh, you're very funny," and I'm like, "All right, there we go. This is the way to do it." And that's like
a good doorway.
Yeah, she was like, "That's one of my favorite things about you, is you just make me laugh. You make me, I could have the worst day, but I know you're gonna make me laugh. I know you're gonna make things better." And for me, that was a big thing. And she was a part of the reason that I got pushed into comedy. And she's like, "You need to do this. Like, this is a thing that you've wanted to do, and you've just said no, whatever." I put it off for a long time, so I didn't start till I was 35. So she pushed me to go do it, and now I'm 42.
That's interesting. That reminds me of Mel Brooks' wife, Anne Bancroft, who's a beautiful movie star. She fell in love with him because of his sense of humor, but she shared a really cool thing where she said, when we were raising our kids and everything, he was at work all the time, but when I would hear his key slide into the lock of our door, I would get this kind of relief, and I would go, now the party starts. because he would come in and he would just make the kids laugh, make me laugh, make everyone laugh. And I was like, that's really the way to be.
Yeah.
If you can be the person that when you show up, people are already feeling a little bit better, that's great.
That's what I try to do. Thank you, Mike, for coming on. I got to go back and hang out with you at the comedy store and hang out with you. We had a fun time talking on the patio and just hanging out. Yeah. I'm sure you were like, "Who's this weirdo trying to talk to me outside?" But
I feel that way about everyone. Who's this weirdo? Who's this weirdo? I'm surrounded by weirdos.
Well, if you're the comedy store, you are surrounded by weirdos. We're all every comedian's a weirdo, so it's fine.
Yeah, that's the wrong place to go if you don't want weirdos in your life.
100%. Well, thank you so much. Where can people follow you? Where can they see more and see like when you're going to be at the store, when you're going to be out and doing stuff?
The very easiest and best way is on Instagram. My Instagram is @MikeBlackIsBack, and I'll promote this on there as soon as it's available and everything. And then I'll be, I don't know when this airs, but I'll be at the Comedy Store tonight.
Next Tuesday.
At midnight. And well, then they missed it.
Yeah.
And they'll just have to wait for the next one. I know, like, people were like already jumping into their cars. Where do we go? No.
They were. Honestly, if you guys haven't seen Mike, if you have never seen him perform, you're missing out. Because I've seen it. Because Darren was like, you got to go watch this. Darren introduced me to Don. Like, hey, you got to go watch him. Yeah. And we watched him late at night, and I was like, what is this? This is amazing. Like, I've never because I didn't know. Like, it was a whole different thing. If you haven't seen that, like, you guys,
if you haven't seen Don Barris, whatever you're doing, if you're anywhere in the Los Angeles area, come see him once before you die.
Yeah, just come watch, and you're gonna go, what am I watching, and why do I love it? Right? That's just
and it'll haunt you for like the rest of your life.
The rest of your life.
Remember that one time we saw Don Barris? It's amazing.
I've seen him 3 times now on purpose. Like, I've gone late to like go to the store. Like, they're like, hey, so and so's over there. I'm like, yeah, I'm waiting. Like, I'm gonna go watch Don. Then we'll and they're like, what? And I'm like, no, you don't understand. It's like a thing. It's like watching a circus happen. Like,
you really don't understand until you've seen it, and everyone should see it. You know,
100%. All right. Well, thank you so much. Well, I'll put all that stuff up there. I know you post sometimes on Instagram, like when you're going to be at the store, or the set list, or the the time you're going to be up.
I try and keep that stuff up when I can,
But definitely, he's there a lot, and he's a fantastic guy. And when you see him, buy him a drink, tell him thank you. See what cool shirt he has on. It's probably either like Lord of the Rings or Marvel or something like that. Something like that.
Something extra nerdy.
Yeah, but it's
I'll
awesome.
Explain my shirt to you if you don't know anything about it.
There you go. Well, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Please like, subscribe. Go check out the links in the show notes below. And don't forget to go check out the Funny Money podcast. It's awesome. You guys will love it. It's on Substack. I'll put the link in the show notes as well. You guys can sign up. You'll get all this stuff. And have a good one. Talk to you soon. Bye.